Man, it's so good to be back with you guys and do a short video. I wanted to take some time this morning before I take off to work and just reflect on the interviews that I did. So I was thankfully able to interview 2 youth pastors and 1 children's pastor this over the last couple weeks, and it's really allowed me to be able to take everything that we've learned throughout all of the reading material and throughout all of the different lectures and really be able to put it into everyday life and really be able to hear about how different topics that we've discussed have played out for different youth pastors along the road. I was able to interview a couple by the names of Gary and Becky Dunham, and they were youth pastors for almost over 10 years, and they worked together one on one as a couple because for them it was very important to be able to have a sustainable youth ministry and be able to work together as a team because it allowed students to be able to see the unity in their marriage but also be able to serve in ministry as well. The second person that I entered was Carl Sorget, and he's been a youth pastor for about 4 years or so now, and he just moved back up to where I live at before he and his wife were youth pastors down about an hour and a half south of where I live. And he also talked about how he and his wife serve in ministry together, and he was telling me about how right now his wife is dealing with some medical issues and how she doesn't have another job outside of the home, but she spends about 20 to 30 hours a week volunteering with him, and how really they look at it as a paycheck together to be able to help support the youth in their ministry, and I'll dig into that more in a couple minutes. And thirdly, I interviewed Pastor Lisa, who is, from everything that I've understood, one of the best children's pastors across the U.S., and I'm thankful to be able to know her from a pastoral perspective, but also just as a reference and somebody that you can be able to go back to time and time again, who has phenomenal ideas in being able to grow and develop children's ministry, anywhere from infancy all the way up into 6th grade, and how that looks, because Pastor Lisa and Pastor Carl end up working together in the same church. Excuse me. And what it does is it gave me the benefit to be able to see how the children's pastor and youth pastor work together to be able to develop a culture and develop a community that as these children are growing up, that they're able to be able to serve in areas where they're passionate and where they have desires to be able to serve. So let me bounce back now to the top of Gary and Becky. Some of the questions that I asked the different pastoral members were, how do/did, because Gary and Becky just left the church that they were at because they felt it was time to move on. But I asked them, how did they sustain a positive youth ministry while they were there? How did they develop a team of adults or other students, rather, to be able to help support them? How did they create major events throughout the school year, and what did their calendar year look like? Because that way then students and parents can both be able to have things that they're looking forward toward. Another question that I asked them was, how are your students connected in your church to feel a part of the community, so that way then they're not just being passed along from one grade to the next? So those are the questions that I asked the different pastors and the different people that I interviewed. And I think what it allowed me to do was have a very broad approach of different questions that I was able to ask them. For instance, Gary and Becky said that building a sustainable youth ministry was an advantage to them to be able to have an advantage over different youth pastors. And the reason that they said this was because when they took the position, they took it in a sense of unity, and they took the job together rather than just as a youth pastor, but they came into it as a couple looking to grow in that area. And so that allowed them to be able to have Gary be able to work with the guys and Becky to be able to work with the girls, because sometimes there's hard subjects to be able to talk about, for a youth pastor to be able to talk about with girls. So they thought that that was a huge advantage that they had over different people, or over other candidates for the jobs. Um, for Pastor Carl, he said the most powerful way is to be able to have a sustainable youth ministry is through small groups. They have something at at Christian Celebration Center called Tribes, and it consists of 5 to 8 students. And once they reach 8 to 10 students, then they split and they create a new tribe. Now, what the tribe does is each tribe has a flag. They have, whatever their specific name is. It could be faithfulness, it could be strength, it could be prism was another one. But what it does is it allows students, excuse me again, to be able to connect with other students specifically at their age, to be able to develop and create friendships in that area, so that that way then they can be able to connect and be able to have good relationships with each other. Pastor Lisa quoted, "Our job is to equip the saints for the ministry that they will do throughout their life. Our goal is to find the passions and the gifts and use kids, youth, and adults of all ages to serve throughout the church." Something that her mentor taught her when she was an intern was that everyone has a different gift, and that when you are the leader over the ministry, that person A is going to do different work than person B, and what that allows is for you as the main leader to step back and say, okay, they're going to do this a little bit differently than I'm going to, but allowing them to be able to take advantage of that and say, okay, I need to let off the reins, not be a micromanager, and allow them to be able to use the giftings that they've had. A couple other questions as I'm going to go down. Major events. Gary and Becky talked about how they planned for the school year around different events that they would do. Something that was taught every year was relationships in Valentine's Day. And Gary said, it's very important for these young guys and these young gals to really be able to find out who they are in Christ and find out about relationships with Christ, but also in the sense of guys and girls to be able to realize that, guys are visually stimulated. Girls are looking for a need. They're looking for someone to desire them. They're looking for that relationship. So that was something that was very important for them. For Pastor Carl at Christian Celebration Center, they have, for instance, their Go Deep retreat, and that's at the beginning of the school year. And Pastor Carl said that they normally will take their school year and they will develop major events throughout the year to be able to adjust, and they'll start out with the school year and then they'll move up and they'll prepare to go into winter camp and a couple subjects that they'll talk about at winter camp and bring those up as precursors for before they go away. And then as the summer goes along, again, similar situation as Gary and Becky did. They talk about relationships in February, but he really focuses more on how the relationship with them and God, and he challenges his students to really be able to be satisfied with who they are in their relationship with Christ, rather than going out and looking for love in the wrong places. And then they end the school year with a mission trip in the summer. So it starts with the basic foundations and then moves up and into how they can be able to apply that. For Pastor Lisa, she uses a yearly calendar. So rather than going August to May, she said students are here the kids are here throughout the school year. And so it's my responsibility to be able to make sure that we have a game plan for the whole entire year. So that's just a handful of the discussions that we had. If I could go more than 10 minutes, I totally would, because everything that I learned was absolutely phenomenal. So if you want to check out the paper below in one of the other forums, I do have the whole paper posted, and it is about 8 pages. So feel free to use it as guidelines or use it as learning material for you to be able to use in the future. I did agree, in all honesty, with a lot of the um, examples that all of the pastors ended up giving me. And what it did was it allowed me to take everything that I've learned out of the materials that we've read through the different books. Because, for instance, and if you desire, you can read in the paper, Gary and Becky talked about how they had a ministry and the youth ministry never grew past 80-ish students. And as we read earlier in the reading, you have to have realistically one paid uh, leader for every 50 students, and then one volunteer, I think it said, for every 5 to 8 students in there. So for them as a married couple, they couldn't get past that 80 number for students. And so it just allowed me to be able to relate that back to the reading. So there were a lot of really, really good points. Pastor Lisa also talked about vision and being able to set a vision out the beginning of the year and say, okay, what are our goals? What are we shooting for this year? What do we want to be able to accomplish in our kids' ministry? So I know this is getting on just 11 minutes, but I hope this has been an encouragement to you. Again, check out the paper below, and I hope that it's something that is encouraging to you. Have an awesome day. Bye.